My name is Brian Wish. I'm an entrepreneur, CEO, and pathfinder. If I've learned anything in life, it's that self-discovery is a critical part of living intentionally, building meaningful relationships, and achieving the future we see for ourselves. In July of 2021, I sold all my possessions, headed west, and began a quest to live a fuller and more meaningful life. The experience helped me truly understand the power of a single moment. And through my conversations with leaders from all walks of life, I've seen how that one phone call, heartbreak, diagnosis, or lost job can transform the entire course of our lives. In this podcast, I sit down with entrepreneurs, influencers, and experts across industries to talk through the events that changed everything. Together, we'll relive the make or break decisions, hard conversations, periods of despair and hope, chance encounters, and everything that followed. James Papiano is the founder and president of James Papiano & Co., an executive coaching and consulting firm built to help managers and leaders navigate change for themselves, their teams, and their organizations. James believes your people can be the catalyst for advancing on priorities and growth. You just need to unlock their potential. James guides clients through paths that are customized to their needs. Each path emphasizes learning and performance for the team and organization, but always focuses on the individual and on the change they can create. As a young man trying to find his way, James found his path forward in an unexpected place. He shares this story on The One Away Show. James, welcome to The One Away Show.
Hi, Brian. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you. James, what is the one away moment that you want to share with us today?
I thought about this. It wasn't an easy reflection, and I'm going to pick something that was sort of incidental, but it was consequential. I had just come back from a few months in the UK. I was 20 years old. I'd been to college, night school and other, accumulating credits here and there. And then I had taken a break and I said, well, I need to go to the UK for 3 months. So I went maybe 3 or 4 months. I came back and I was going to go on a road trip with a friend to Texas. While I was waiting for that departure day, I was on a train platform outside of Philadelphia. It was Haverford Station, and it was a Sunday, I know, because the trains were on a light schedule. So just 2 hours between every train. And it was just two people on the platform. It was me and one other guy. We started chatting. He goes to Haverford College. He asked me where I went. And I said, well, I don't go to college. And then I rather naively said, in retrospect, it makes me wince. But I said, well, I'm not going to go to college, because I had been reading this book while I was traveling. And this guy said, well, you don't need to go to college because you just need to read these great books or whatever. And so I idiotically said that to this guy, and he said, oh, well, if that's your view, you should check out St. John's College, which I had never heard of before. He said, there's one in Annapolis, there's one in Santa Fe, and you could go to either one. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to Texas, which is right next to New Mexico. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. Well, long story short, that was probably in the spring. And by the next fall, I was enrolled for a January start at St. John's. So, wow. Right?
And that's the one in Santa Fe, correct?
Yeah, I stayed all 4 years in Santa Fe. Yeah.
Well, I'm learning even more about you. I absolutely love Santa Fe. It is a beautiful place. House. Anyways, this is about you, but sounds like a pivotal moment for sure on the train. And what a gift for someone to recognize, hey, maybe there's an opportunity. Why do you think he recommended to you St. John's College? Like, what was it about that school where, you said, hey, I don't have a desire to go. This really isn't for me. And he said, well, if you feel that way, you should go here. Well, what was it about this place?
So I'm going to guess that it was because when I was in the UK, I was working at a pub. I was reading it at night. I was reading this biography of Shelley, the poet. And I told him that, and I told him that what Shelley had said, which was like, I think Shelley dropped out of college, so he was all full of himself and said, you don't need to go to college. And I said that to him, and said, you just need to read these great books. I think it was the word great books because St. John's is a great books program. So that's probably the connection that he made.
Oh, hey, okay, got it. And great books is it's an online it's a big thing, right? Online.
It's not, no, it's a live campus. But what it means is, you start by reading Plato, Aristotle, and Homer, and then you go through and read Einstein and
Oh, I see.
Wittgenstein.
They had a great books program.
Yeah, the whole curriculum is small roundtable classrooms, and this you can't transfer credits in because the curriculum is so unique. You have to start at the beginning.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, well, I'll share more after. I have a great story about this for you. But for you, James, what was it about some more famous, works of art, these books that, have stood the test of time that drew your interest to say, hey, maybe I am right. Why did you think, hey, maybe this is for me?
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say that I had like fully formed thoughts at the time,
Yeah.
but I would say I think what I did have experience with was going to large universities, and that wasn't a great fit being in a lecture hall with 400 people. And so I think the format of the school was interesting to me. The fact that this campus was in New Mexico was interesting to me. And the books themselves, I thought, you know, public school kid, from outside of Philadelphia, didn't have the chance to read those things, didn't take Latin in school or Greek or anything like that. And so I had a little bit of a chance to catch up on that. I was curious. I didn't really know what I was getting into. Um, but I was curious enough to explore it. And then once I got there, I think that really was transformative for me.
Yeah, totally. I'm sure just immersing yourself in a environment with, I get really resonate what you said about, not 400 kids in a lecture hall, but immersing yourself in an environment where smaller student bodies and a way to immerse yourself in the classroom and just the material was super conducive to your own learning and growth and development.
Right. And even looking back now, there are some things I can pull direct threads from then to what I'm doing now, in the sense that a lot of my work is focused on small groups. It's based on dialogic problem solving. Whether you're doing coaching or whether you're doing consulting, you need to be a great conversationalist. That was part of the training there. And in terms of small, I mean, my freshman class, I think, was 120 people. And by the time we graduated, we were 79. So it is a really tiny, tiny place.
No, that's a good reflection. I definitely want to get to the work you're doing now in small groups in a bit. But, before we go there, I want to touch on back to the train moment. Why, James, for you, did you think in the first place college wasn't for you? Like, what was it about where
Oh,
you arrived in the UK where you were like, hey, this just isn't for me?
no, that's a great question. And full disclosure, that was a lie I was telling myself. College was definitely for me. And I think I was just floundering around a bit and glommed on to what I was reading in that book, and as a justification for not being anywhere at the moment, talking shit on the train platform with a person I don't even know. So I think that was really what it was. Ultimately, what I found out about going to St. John's was that it was a good fit for me, and that made it perhaps all the more meaningful because it had been, sort of a journey to get there. I did think I should go to college. I just had a kind of a circuitous route
Where you grew up, by the way, for context setting?
outside of Philly in the
Outside of
suburbs.
So, like growing up, was education a big part of the discussion at the table at night? I mean, what were you thinking about as a younger child or just in your teens around kind of where you wanted to be and interest and things that were stimulating to you then?
Yeah, so I think I didn't really get my footing as a student in high school. I think early on, I was into school, and by the time I got to college, I think wouldn't say that I was a brilliant student, but I was finding my footing and feeling much more comfortable and really enjoying the work that I was doing. But growing up, I would say there was a tacit expectation that we were going to go to college, the children were going to go to college, but there wasn't really a culture around that. And there really wasn't a know-how around how that happens because my parents didn't go to school. When you look at it in that context, my circuitous route makes a little bit more sense.
Hmm. Got it. So parents didn't go to college, grew up in the other Philly suburbs, and you brought up this language now around finding your footing. And even in London, I mean, sure, you might have been thinking about college, but you were working in the pub and reading, and it seems like exploring. I mean, tell me more about this finding your footing kind of narrative for yourself. Like what, I guess my two questions, and they're both related. Do you feel like you've kind of found your footing now in life? And why did you feel like you were trying so hard to kind of find it back then? I very much relate to you and what you're sharing, but I'm curious your perspective on that.
Yeah. So again, I don't think I'm unique in this regard, but the way I think about it for myself is, as you said, it is an exploration, particularly in those years, but I would say it's always an exploration and yourself is unfolding. And if you're paying attention, then that's a good thing. And you can kind of say, yeah, that's me, that's not me, whatever. And and so I would say being able to see myself both internally, like, hey, this feels right, but also externally, like, I'm actually able to contribute in these environments, or I make sense in this environment. So for example, just fast forwarding a little bit, when I started working in organizations, it was kind of like a large university versus a small college. It was really bewildering to me,
Mm.
at some level. And I ultimately found my footing realizing that I'm more of an outsider insider. I still, want to be in the trenches, helping people, doing the work, solving problems, but I am more valuable to them
Mm.
when I'm on the outside. And I'm a little bit more comfortable myself when I'm not having only that field to play in.
Mm.
But I found it a little limiting.
I think it's a very interesting perspective of being on the outside in, inside out. Tell me more about experiences or times in your life that where you've kind of felt this resistance of being on the inside, like and with the kind of the constraints of maybe not being able to be on the outside. Like where have you felt that and what does that look like for you? For you to realize, hey, like I kind of want my foot in each part because I can be more valuable.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it was only about constraints. I think there's some really great things about being in organizations. Even for me, I think that, there's some super valuable aspects to it. Having the same team, having the same work context, the work environment. That's a trade-off that I make now because I have lots of different clients and work in different places. But there were some absolute advantages as I was developing skills and things like that, to working inside organizations. But even inside organizations, I think the way I'm wired, I'm about what's next. I'm about what's new. And I'm not about necessarily maintaining and preserving what is. And so in organizations, quite rightly, a lot of jobs they're not all about innovating. They're not all about what's next. They're about sort of controls or stability or preserving something that's good. And so I get a little bit antsy if
Hmm.
I don't have new territory to go into. And
Yeah.
so that's the primary difference in terms of like what I get when I'm on the outside is I get to sometimes it's not always great, Brian, to be honest, but like, there are downsides too, but in my world, I get to change the channel quite a lot. And
Yeah.
here's another really important piece. I have learned that I have a very high capacity to take in information and to find connection points. And if I don't have a certain threshold of inputs, then I get bored. And so by working with a wide array of clients and a wide array of organizations, I end up being able to satisfy my need to learn
Hmm.
because I'm getting a wide set of inputs. And as a practical matter, I get to translate learnings from one place to the next. That keeps me intellectually engaged.
Hmm.
And spiritually, I feel much more gratified by that than even if I were hitting home runs in the same organization over and over and over again.
I want to really resonate with kind of your thinking. And realize this maybe not the constraints wasn't the right word in retrospect, but not kind of staying in the same place in the repetitive way of having to do the continued thing. But if you understand what I'm hearing you say is, if I understand what's really happening on the inside of things, I can go outside of home and I can go get these perspectives here, 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 and here. Not only can I be valuable internally to these perspectives, right? Or internally to like this home base, but what I've learned in this home base, I can also go be more valuable to these tentacles kind of outside the home base. And so sounds like what I'm hearing you say is like the ability to constantly hover and learn makes you more valuable having one foot in and one foot out.
I think that's absolutely true. It's nicely said. I think there's also some research that shows the value of having top leaders inside organizations be either insider outsiders or outsider insiders. We could parse that at another time, but I think the way that it's configured for me, it's a flywheel of energy and learning, which is hugely important to me just on a day-to-day basis, but it does allow me to make contributions that I wouldn't otherwise be able to make. And I should say too, especially if you're wired a little bit like me and we're vibing on this, we should acknowledge that the people who are wired to maintain or to stabilize systems are incredibly valuable to people like me. I absolutely have to have them around, and I love working with them because the synergy between my come from place and their style is really powerful if we do it right. I don't want anybody listening to get the impression that, one is better than the other.
Yeah. Let me totally. I mean, look, no, James, we are very similar people, and I resonate with. Maybe the reason I can reflect back to you is because I'm finding a lot of what you're saying in myself. You're reading the book on the train. St. John's very exploratory in the books and the reading. Like, why do you feel like you're constantly having to? And by the way, I think this is a great quality because I know it. But why do you, as James Papiano, kind of always feel like you have to be kind of drinking from fire hoses elsewhere and getting that intellectual stimulation. Like what drives that within you?
Right. So I would say that's a good way to ask it because it gives me the opportunity to calibrate my position here. So I am not advocating for myself or for everybody to be overloaded or to overwhelm. And I talk a lot in my work about the importance of oscillating performance with recovery. That said, I think there are a couple of things that inform the way I approach my work and my life and the way I approach, my practice and helping other people. They're very similar. It's less about fire hose and more about curiosity
Hmm.
and more about needing to learn, but for the sake of what, right? So in some
Yeah.
cases, it's a very practical thing. You just, I want to learn how to do X or Y. But in some cases, it's more learning about self so that I can develop, like so that I can be not necessarily better, but more
Hmm.
of myself, right? So my viewpoint is that it takes a lot of awareness and a lot of work to be a self, and that unfolds over the course of a lifetime, and we probably die before it's completed. And to me, that's just super fascinating. And I think, the clients I work with on the coaching side and the teams that we work with are on that same path in some way, shape, or form. And so it's not so much that I get bored because I can't chill out or I can't relax. It's more that, and it's not ambition per se, it's more that I know that this is the way that we learn about ourselves. This is, you just have to kind of keep going on new territory. At least I do. It's not absent anxiety. There's probably some anxiety underneath it all about there's always anxiety when you're in new territory because you don't know if you can do it. Once you realize that you can do it and you understand how that flywheel works, it's really compelling. You can't put it down. Everything else pales in comparison.
I want to get to your work because I think you said something really interesting about how you're maybe potentially bringing that into the people you're working with. But you have this constant pursuit of discovery. It's when we die, it's probably never done, and maybe your soul is rebirthed and goes into something else. But whether you believe that or not, who knows? But my point is that you have this constant thirst for evolution of self, is what I'm hearing you say. So I think to have that understanding, you have to, like you said, it takes a lot of awareness and a lot of work because you're constantly growing. I'm sure you've thought about this, maybe you haven't, but what are the layers of James Papiano that you feel are awaiting discovery that are in front of you that you haven't quite
Hmm.
peeled back?
That's a hard one. I will say just to start that one of the lucky things for me is that I am doing work that I love to do and that I did before I got paid for it, and I would do if I don't get paid for it, in the sense of helping other people sort themselves out and sort their situations out and sort their work environments out.
Hmm.
I think in terms of what's next for me or what I'm working on, one of the things that I think is true is that if you're doing your life right, it trends towards greater complexity. And my life is that for sure. And so some of what the new frontier is for me is to be able to get my arms around all that complexity in a way that's sustainable and fulfilling. It's not necessarily like, oh, I want to do this with my business or I want to do this kind of activity. It's more I'm doing the things I want to do. It's doing them in a sustainable way where, I can manage sleep, nutrition, exercise, meditation, manage clients, manage friends and family in a way that's enriching and wholesome for myself. I'm showing up for people in my life the way I want to. I would say that's the biggest thing that I work on sort of constantly.
You don't check a box on those and turn the page.
But I do find it this is a little nerdy, but I find it really interesting and fun too. So I'm not advocating this for anyone else, but you're asking about me. 12 years ago or 15 years ago, when people were talking about the quantified self, I was like, this is ridiculous. This is just a bunch of like Silicon Valley craziness. And now here I am measuring my sleep and measuring other things, and I love it. So it's not the pursuit of perfection, but it is the pursuit of understanding and sort of well-being, I think,
Mhm.
is what really drives that.
You're giving me notes here. I'm jotting down on some thoughts for you. Um, the pursuit of well-being and the quantified self. So, James, as always, we should talk more because it's always a pleasure. You've built I think, a really interesting practice working with clients, organizations, people. We've touched on a lot of core kind of stories of yours, kind of, let's say, life principles and how you show up in the world and why. How does all the things that we've discussed, and maybe it's not a ton, but like there's some threads here. How is that showing up when you're working with clients? And feel free to kind of introduce kind of the work that you do, who you're doing it with, but even deeper, like how does some of these core pieces show up in that work? Because it sounds very aligned and integrated, but I'll let you share.
What I do is executive coaching and team coaching, as well as some talent and management consulting. That leads into some leadership team workshops and trainings, retreats, strategic planning, and things like that. But thematically, my approach is to focus on helping people be their best selves, and they get to define that. I'm not defining that, but they define it. And that best self informs their best leader, and their best leader informs their best team. And so we were talking earlier about finding my footing. A lot of people, ambitious people, are always in new territory, right? That's the nature of the beast. And by definition, therefore, they don't know how to do what they're doing. They know how to do part of it, but they don't know how to do it all. And another layer of that is that most people got into their business for some other reason than managing people and organizational culture and some of the things you have to do when you get into these positions. And so what I hope we're able to do for people is to help them find their footing, find their voice, and hold on to it in the context and sort of all the turbulence of their jobs and their world, so that that informs their leadership. What we know is that when people are more comfortable in themselves, they have a better sense of well-being, their performance is better. In order to get people to a place where they are feeling well, we sometimes have to focus on, okay, who are you in your best self and what environments bring out that best work? And then on top of that, we support them in learning skills around leadership or teaming or whatever it is. And then from there, we work with team dynamics. Really, for me, the whole reality is you cannot be an effective leader unless you're willing to work on yourself.
Hmm.
And those are very different things at some level.
You know, to your point, how you're showing up in your organization is a direct reflection of work you've done within, right? As what I'm hearing you say. Your work as an executive coach in meeting different people on the different spectrum. How do you show up as an executive coach differently for the people who have done a lot of this work on themselves and who are can maybe thrive faster versus the people who want to do this work, do have no idea where to start, but know that they need it to be able to take the next step in their own evolution? Because I don't want to be presumptuous, but I'm sure you see people at different parts of the spectrum. So I'm sure, how do you handle that in leading and guiding them?
Yeah, 100%. So in coaching, you're really not leading the client. You're following their lead.
Hmm.
And so to your point, people will show up at various stages of interest or readiness to do different kinds of work. You know, a lot of times there's something at work that's prompting the initial inquiries and the initial need for a coach. And that's where we start. So, sometimes it starts with some kind of organizational change or organizational transformation or crisis or something that this leader's having challenges with. And when we work down into things that might be affecting that or their capabilities to address that, like, things about the self, things about them outside of work. In other cases, people will go right away and sort of dive into some of those substrates. What we do at the beginning of a coaching engagement is we do a number of assessments. And one of those assessments is an energy and recovery survey that I put together because years ago, I was realizing that clients were not getting the traction that they wanted in their professional lives, but they were also not considering that sleep, nutrition, exercise, and other activities could help them or hurt them, depending on how that was showing up. And so at the beginning of an engagement, I have a very quick understanding, because it's like 60 questions people answer, how people are doing on sleep, nutrition, and exercise. And it's not for me to evaluate that. It's more as a conversation starter. but I'm bringing this up because some people will go through that and they'll be really interested. Like, okay, how can I start tweaking my exercise? How can I start tweaking my sleep?
Mm,
And other people are like, yeah, that's nothing to me. I don't care about that. We're going to go over here and we're going to talk about my team. And
mm,
and you just meet people where they are with the footnote that as a coach, you would be remiss, let me put it this way, you'd be remiss in your duty if you didn't get curious about other things that the client isn't directing you toward. So it will come up at some point, but it's not prescriptive, right? It's discovery.
I appreciate the context of you're not leading them, you're kind of meeting them where they are and then introducing things to them that may be supportive to them. And if they do take care of their health and things, they might just show up better in the workplace and at home and in all the areas of life. Now, I'm curious for you, right? I mean, you believe this is the most important part. I remember when we had breakfast, it seems like you had a nice healthy bowl of oatmeal and you stick to your health routine. But what is, if I was to ask you, if I was to observe the life of James Papiano for a few weeks, kind of how do you show up for yourself kind of day in and day out, week in and week out? Like what's the health routine of James look like and how do you notice that supporting you, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good question. A little awkward since the aspiration and the reality are not always aligned. And in fact, more often are not aligned, but I can tell you a little bit about both. So generally over the years, what I've come to is sleep is king, and that's sort of the substrate. So I have worked, what you would see if you were looking at me in a lab is on good days, my sleep hygiene is on point and it's the same every day. And I'm winding down and turning screens off and chilling out for an hour and a half before bedtime, getting up at the same time. You might see that I have a cooling system on my mattress. You might see that I measure my sleep. You would see that I get up and go outside and take a walk and do meditation and don't eat right away. But what you would see on bad days is you would see some of those things not happening, including meditation or sleep would be off because of travel or something like that. And then you would just see my energy shift. I would be tired. I would, not be as relaxed as I might be in other, you know, there's just sort of an edge that you find when you're not well fed or well slept or well exercised. And I would say the other thing is that the other thing that happens when those personal habits get out of whack, they get out of whack for a reason. And what it means is that other parts of your work or your life have eclipsed those. And that's
Hmm.
probably the thing that's most disequilibrating for me. What it means is that maybe it was not even under my control, but often it is. And it makes me think about, how am I maintaining my boundaries? What choices am I making about being up late? How I build my schedule? All those kind of things. It's definitely when I feel stressed or I feel off my game, I go right back to the basics. Where's meditation? Where's food? Where's exercise? Where's sleep?
When you are on your game, when you are getting to bed on time, you're doing your meditation, you're getting your exercise in, eating well, have boundaries. What have you noticed about how you're showing up in the world differently for your clients and yourself, right? Like what's that feel like to you? I'd love to hear more.
It shows up mostly in just internally. I'm not sure other people would notice it, but for me, what it is it's a lot more open, relaxed, patient. You can see your sensitivity to what you're hearing is different. Your ability to see the options in the middle of a conversation or in the middle of a situation.
Hmm.
If you're in a room full of people that were for a talk or a training or something like that, you're just much more dialed in and stuff that other people wouldn't notice, I will notice. In part because I've been doing this for a long time, but on better days and worse days, I'm going to be a better filter for that kind of stuff. And then as a facilitator or as a coach or a consultant, that's a little bit of a thread and you want to pull on that thread. But if you don't see the thread or you don't have the presence available to you because of some physiological thing
Mm.
to identify it and orchestrate the conversation in a certain way, then you don't get to pull on that thread and then the value is diminished.
You know, what's so interesting and kind of bring us back to where we all started is these one-away moments, right? Like if you're not healthy, you're not feeling good, and you're not showing up to these conversations, you might completely miss the opportunity to connect the dots on something. And because of that, you could have had an incredible return on luck of just showing up if you were physically there versus
Right.
physiological depleted. You miss the moment, you miss asking the right question to the right person, and that doesn't happen. And the compounding effect of that, of not being healthy in those conversations over a long period of time, I mean, that's significant. And that's what I'm hearing you say. You a lot of missed opportunities when you're not taking care of yourself.
It's a readiness factor. I think that's right. You're in a
Hmm.
much more effective ready state. And I think it's important to make the connection for people that this is not about a certain body composition or a weight or something like that. And what it is about understanding how you are at your best intellectually, psychologically, and your physiology has something to do with that. It's not everything to do with that, but that readiness state, I love the way you put that. It's absolutely where people are going to perform best. The trick is that there are lots of levers and lots of triggers that
Mhm.
can make that more optimal or less optimal.
Oh, James, I wish we had 2 more hours, which means we'll just have to schedule more time to talk. But
Love
James,
it.
this has been a treat per usual, but I feel like we struck a lot of nerves that make sense to me, and I hope we're supportive in voicing for you. Thanks for sharing about who you are and how you show up in the world and how you show up with people around you. Absolutely loved it. And please keep us posted. Where can people find you, reach out to you, support you?
Yeah, you can see me on LinkedIn or at my website, jamespapiano.com.
Awesome.
Love to connect with people. Also, really appreciate when people who are uninitiated to coaching reach out. I'll talk to anybody, mostly, and a lot of coaches will do this, mostly because we think that everybody should have advisors on their bench and coaches on their bench. And so it's almost like a cottage industry. You just talk to people to kind of educate them. And if people are interested in that, they can definitely reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Take care.
Thank you for joining me on the One Away Show. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, please leave a review and follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Have a one away moment you'd like to share? Follow me on Twitter or Instagram at BrianWish_, or reach out to me on LinkedIn and tell me about the moment that altered your life. The One Away Show is produced by Arcbound, a company dedicated to helping entrepreneurs, experts, and visionaries launch authentic personal brands. From message development to podcast production, social media content generation, and book writing, we work with you to create your arc. Head to arcbound.com to learn more. Thank you for listening, and please join me next time on The One Away Show.